You're listening to The Journey with Ellie and Erin. Join us every week as we talk about all the things woo, wise and wonderful with our guests and have the bigger, braver, bolder conversations that women should be having so that we can be the change the world needs.
Hello and welcome. Today we are so lucky and honoured to have the fabulous Elyse Falzone with us to talk about her journey. Elyse is an amazing intuitive healer and energy alchemist for CEOs and spiritual newbies alike. She supports her community to create intimate relationships with intuition, activate their unique DNA and awaken their divine spiritual gifts. Elyse connects with her clients through immersive and interactive experiences, guiding and honouring them, holding space, helping them let go, open and expand. She is an incredible woman. I have been so lucky to work with her in the past, and she's helped me release a whole load of stuff, welcome in a whole load of stuff, was gorgeously supportive just before my youngest Phoebe was born, and it's just amazing to see your face and be in space with you again. So how are you, Elyse, and welcome.
Thank you. I'm so good. I'm so happy to be here with the two of you and just talk about this crazy thing called life, spirituality, motherhood, all the crazy things. But I'm very excited to be here.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to see you. And I think we'll dive straight in because, hey, why not? Spiritual awakening, what you do in the world, how did it all come about? Big question straight off the bat.
Lots of pieces to it, but I'll kind of give you like the particular like moments that were really big moments and big turning points for me. When I was really little, I was always interested in the sixth sense. You know, now we don't even say that anymore. We say intuition. But back then it was the sixth sense. And I was so interested in all the people talking about it at the time in the books and learning about just what does it mean for these like invisible things that were kind of taboo at the time, and I was just really interested in it. When my mom was pregnant with me, my grandmother died, and so there's been this really beautiful synergy with my grandmother's spirit and myself, and even through now to my sons. And I knew about her. And so my mom was very clear that I had this intuitive gift. I had this sixth sense. And so before I even understood what it was, she was telling me that I was talking to my grandmother, and she remembers when I was 2 and 3 years old, sharing things about my grandmother that she never shared with me, that my mom never shared with me. So it's something that I really came into this particular lifetime, like with the path of being a healer, with the path of this awakening, with the path of being a space holder for people. So that was really like the first thing that occurred. And then throughout my life, I've had so many different ailments that are very strange ailments that doctors haven't been able to figure out. I had metal toxicity from my braces when I was 13. They put braces on, fixed my teeth. I got really, really ill. Like all the autonomic system, functionings were just not happening. And finally, after desperation, someone suggested that my mom take me to like a holistic practitioner. And within 15 minutes, she was like, your daughter's metal toxic. We need to detox her body. She really became my first teacher. She taught me about color therapy, about chakras, about listening to my body, about how to detox my body. And that was really the turning point. I heard a voice that I believed to be God's voice that said to me, you are a healer. It was so loud. It was so potent. It was a little freaky. And yet I knew there was something in my body, in my being, that knew that there was something true about that there was like something to uncover at some point in time. And then also throughout my, probably 10 to 15, I was seeing spirits. I was seeing the good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful. And I just got really scared. I was really afraid, like a lot of people do when they start awakening their gifts. They don't know that there's this thing that can, they don't know that you can ask for protection, that you can ask to see certain things and kind of turn up the dial or turn it down. And so I said a prayer. It's like, God, I know these are gifts, but please take them away until one day I'm ready. Like, I knew there was something in my being that just knew that this was for me. I just didn't know what to do with it, and I was scared shitless. And so, I had more like ailments and more body things that occurred. The kind of final tipping point was in 2010. I had melanoma skin cancer. It was a time in my life when my husband and I were, financially broke. I was not exactly happy in my life. We were okay in our marriage, but we weren't communicating very well. And I just remember I was like, I got to write a book. I got to do something. I got to get out there. I got to talk to people. And I said a prayer on my couch in my living room. And I said, if you will take this melanoma away, and they had to go in and scope to see if it was further in my lymph system and all of that stuff. Thank God it was not. But I basically kind of cut a deal with spirit and said, if you take this away, I get it. I get it. This is my moment to surrender. This is my moment to open my heart. This is my moment to let my gifts come back in. And sure enough, that's what happened. I had a healing session with a friend of mine who was a healer. We did it on the beach. She scooped it out of my back. We both visually saw this black chunk of cancer get tossed into the ocean. Everything was fine after that. I started meeting my teachers, my mentors. It was like the floodgates opened. And that was really kind of, it was really my surrender moment to say, okay, I get it. I get it. This is my call. This is what I'm meant to do. Show me the way.
So much in that, but I'm actually going to hand straight over to Erin because I know she'll have heard your connection with your grandmother and ears would have pricked up, and also all of the things. So I'm going to sit quietly for a moment and let Erin ask the next question.
Meanwhile, I'm just sitting here basking in that, going, there's so many synchronicities with my own story, and yet at the same time, so many differences that fascinate me. So I guess for me, that whole process, it feels like, from what you've said, there was never really a point of awakening as such, as just this long, slow kind of journey. I mean, it sounds very much like you've always had that holistic approach to life, where that there isn't a single source of truth, and you don't, you've had obviously alternative healers and spiritual healers and those sorts of people in your life, in and out forever. And so I guess my first question is, how do you approach working with other people who don't have that experience, who are coming from a place of complete, for want of a better word, sleep, in terms of their spirituality? Because it feels, and you can correct me if I've caught that wrong, but it feels like there's always been an awareness within you of it. Yeah. And the awakening was kind of more of just okay, I'm actually going to allow it in, as opposed to having no idea what was going on and then suddenly having this massive awakening.
Yeah, that's I love how you put that. Thank you for that reflection back. In any of my charts and in any of the, whether it's human design or astrological charts, I mean, it's like, this was the thing for me in this lifetime. And I'm beyond grateful, and I'm continually brought to my knees, humbled all the time in the work that I do. And I love this question. I think the people who specifically come to me tend to have a fear of being seen, tend to be afraid to fully hear or see or know, whichever way they receive their information. And I I actually believe that it's been a supportive thing because it's been so titrated for me. Because there's been this like slow lapping, if you will, and then it's sped up, of course, but there's been this journey to allow me to actually intricately understand how the developing of the gifts occur and how the opening up to them occur. So when people come to me, there's this safety in them feeling like it feels safe in whatever capacity, retreats or online gifts or online courses or whatever it happens to be, that I can hold that space for the mass awakening that happens, or someone who is like, I've been this like closet spiritual person that I've been afraid to tell my family, or I've been afraid, like I get visitors in the night that are from other realms and I don't know what to do with it. And so I'm able to help them actually dissect it a bit, to help them understand it. You know, a lot of times I'll talk about being like a spiritual translator, because I'm able to help them with bridge the gap between where they're at and who's trying to talk to them and where that information is coming, and help them find that like cozy home in between. So thank you for that. I've never really considered that in this. I love that I'm learning something about myself as you're asking me that question. But I actually think it's been helpful, because whether someone has it dramatically or someone has been, like I said, in the closet and a little bit more fearful, it's like I've seen it all, and I've been with them on the journey some way, somehow, at every level, at every age, at every kind of crossing point. And since that original awakening, I have had tons of other massive awakenings that happen, you know, as that next level jumps. And so it's powerful to see the cycles. It's powerful to see where people come in. And for me, it really is about people feeling safe, comfortable, and knowing that they have a voice. And it's really about co-creation with spirit. You know, it doesn't just have to be one way. They have a voice in how they want to titrate and see how those next phases of intuition occur for them.
Perfect. Thanks. Ellie, I know you've got stuff to say. I can see it, that you're sitting there going,
I'm just reveling in listening to that, because I think it's really interesting when you talk about those different spaces that people are in on their journey, and how what time they decide to reach out. Because I mean, Erin and I have talked about this in the past, about my one was relatively long, you know, it's sort of not my whole life, certainly not that long, but it's probably been a good sort of 12, 13 years now from that moment when I, you know, knew there was more. And I would say in terms of the actual, you know, awakening to my gifts and all of that sort of stuff, I'm still very much learning on that. There's still a huge amount to be done in that space, because I still fight it, because it still challenges my humanness massively. Yeah. And every now and then I have moments where I just know that there's more. And then it's like, nope, I don't have time for that at the moment. I've got to get the kids ready for school, and I've got to do this, that, and whatever. And there's always a good excuse. Whereas for Erin, it was a much shorter and quicker sort of move from not being particularly connected to being bang smack in the middle of all of the stuff, and, you know, is very much more connected and uses those gifts. So it's really interesting hearing you talk about how you help people at the different levels. If somebody listening sort of knows that there's something for them, you know, a little bit like me, knows that they just knows, and sometimes we have to just accept that it is a knowing. There's not necessarily any more proof than that. What's the first step? Like, how do people start to feel more confident and more comfortable with the fact that they have a gift that might mean they can do some stuff that feels a little bit crazy, for want of a better word?
Yeah, I love that. You know, one of the first things that I always have people do is connect with their physical bodies. a lot of times we think that this spiritual awakening is like so far beyond us and into the ether, which it absolutely can be. I have had many meditations and journeys where I'm just going out of body. And yet, because of our traumas, because of our struggles, because of circumstances that occur in our lives, we disassociate from our bodies. And so a lot of times I actually invite people into their body first. I know Ellie is like very familiar with this from the Certified Healers course that we did. I do a body scan, and I really have people visualize what is going on in the physical body, or feel, right? We all have different ways of being with that information. But when we can tune into our bodies hold the wisdom that we aren't yet ready to receive. And so the body opens up to this magical, like mysterious place that we've been avoiding for so long. And so a lot of times it's a body scan. I also just really love journal prompts. I think journal prompts can provide a lot of insight. I usually invite people to do a journal prompt for longer than 2 or 3 minutes. I'll usually have them do it for 12 minutes, 20 minutes, where it's like you cannot put your pen down for that amount of time. And I don't care if you're writing blue, green, my son was picking his nose, I have to pick up the dry cleaning. Like, I don't care if that's what starts to come through. But when you start doing it long enough, your subconscious will take over and start to share some really valuable information with you. It's powerful. It's almost, I've not done a study on this, but I feel like if I had a group of people and we did that, there's something for every single person that occurs. Even if you think, I'm a bad journaler or I don't like to write, it doesn't really matter, because your subconscious will start to talk to you. So those would be the 2 things that I would say immediately that you could do.
See, Erin, I told you that journaling is the right way. We have an ongoing battle around journaling, because she's like, I journal in my head. I'm like, no, that's just thinking.
You got 2. Go to the body or go to the journal or get outside in nature. I mean, gosh, nature gives us so much information.
I mean, you just gave Ellie so much ammo. So thanks, I think. So I guess I know Ellie wants to talk about that whole cycle and the birth and death and rebirth cycle. And you sort of touched on it a little bit when you were talking about the awakening being like really cyclic, and you know, you go to the next level and there's another cycle, and then you go through the next level, and that's certainly something that both Ellie and I have experienced and felt, and we talk about a lot in our work. How did you, like, in terms of your humanness, how did you come to understand that cycle? Because it's not something that we're taught as humans, but it's something we know as humans, I think. But yes. I think a lot of people block that knowledge and you know, go with the conditioning of it's a linear journey and you just have to keep going and you have to keep pushing forward. How did you come to that sort of understanding for yourself around that stuff?
It took a lot of years. I think it took a lot of different pieces of the puzzle to come together to recognize these cycles. You know, first and foremost, like as women, we have monthly cycles, and that is something that we are so far out of tune to. So that was one element, is really learning to tune into my own blood cycles and what does that mean, and how does that impact who I be on a daily basis, and how does it affect my mood? And, you know, there's like day 8 is a pretty angry day for me in my cycle. Like, it just is. And whatever the hormones do in my body, I know that that's not a great day to like get into deep conversations with my husband or with family members. So that was kind of in the field, especially working with so many women and noticing it in other women. I am also a very highly emotional person. I cycle the highest of highs. If I'm having fun, you will know I'm having fun. If I feel like shit, you're going to know that I feel like shit. And as I have taken off my own mask of spiritual bypassing and my own mask of like, I love everybody to feel good and I love everybody to be like the most beautiful, but that, that's just not always true. And so as I uncovered that inside of myself, allowing my own realness and humanness to be shown when I was angry or sad or needing to process something, as I've given my own self space to process, my own intuition has brought in the knowledge around cycles and around, the light and the shadow, the yin and the yang. And I have my own work that I do, but I also do partnership work with another woman named Gina Starbuck. And inside of our work together, we work with alchemizing the energies. And so this whole idea of alchemy has come forward in my work. And it's beautiful because a lot of times her and I hold the different polarizing energies. And maybe you guys experience this in your own partnership. I don't know, but when, like one of us is feeling in the slumps, it's like the other one holds the opposite pole and vice versa. And it's really beautiful to witness. So I think through my own experience in life, those rebirth and death cycles have occurred. And my own healing has revealed that. And then, like I said, working with the women that I work with and continuing to expand that community, it just is. And sitting with nature, I love to sit with nature and just do a plant sit. I mean, yes, you can ingest the plants and go on plant journeys, but literally just sitting with a plant, it can reveal so much to you about the cycle of life and the death and rebirth. We just went through a hurricane here in Florida, like a massive hurricane. Like I'm in Fort Myers where like the beaches were completely flattened and I mean, just total destruction. And the trees, I've been weeping with the trees. The trees are twisted and on the ground and like complete like roadways of grass, just completely lifted up. And it's wild though, because they're telling me like, it's okay. It's part of the cycle and needing to quote unquote burn down so that this reforestation can occur and this rebirth cycle can occur. So it's been heightened for me. It's been brought to me in my own life. I see it in other women. And then this opens a bigger can of worms, and we can go there if you want to. But earlier in this year, I actually had a near-death experience. This is a bit of a trigger for those of you who are pregnant or have experienced pregnancy loss. I didn't know that I had an ectopic pregnancy. Based on the scans, they showed that I was having a miscarriage. So we were trying to allow my body to have that release. And then at 20 weeks, I went to the hospital because I was in a lot of pain and there was an ectopic pregnancy in there. Thankfully, I was at the hospital, but it ruptured. And because of where it was sitting in my uterus, part of my uterus actually ruptured. So they had to take part of my uterus out. They took one of my fallopian tubes out. And just a few days ago, actually, a friend of mine works in the hospital, and she was working with the anesthesiologist that was with me that day. And she was like, do you remember this girl? Like, they say that you saved her life, because he was the one who really like saw like what occurred and helped me. Anyway, he said, it wasn't me that saved her life. It was an entire team of us. And quite honestly, we don't know how she's still here. It was completely divine intervention. And I lost 85% of my blood. I mean, it was a really big thing. And through that process, this whole death and rebirth cycle came about again. And because I work with women, and it's like, I really go there with the experience in life, and through the depths and through the pain and through the heartache and through the hardships, it allows me to actually understand the human while connecting with the divine. It sucks sometimes, and yet there's a lot of beauty in it. So I'll pause there.
Wow, thank you for sharing that with us, Elyse, because that's a really, it's a really extreme example of that cycle, and for you to go through that, and for that guy to say that it was divine intervention. I mean, that just sums up that you're absolutely still meant to be here, sharing your work and doing all of the amazing things that you do. So, personally, I'm very grateful, but also I think as a universe, we also need to be very grateful, because we need people like you who are willing to go through these processes and these experiences so that they can share and support other women, because being a woman is really hard. And it's one of the things that we talk about a lot. There's so many structures, systems, all of the things in place to basically hold us back, keep us small, not allow us to feel all of our emotions, to not be able to experience all of our life, because it makes people deeply uncomfortable. I mean, just as one little example, how triggering can be, are periods for men. I mean, it's completely nuts that 50% of the population have them, and yet guys still find it really awkward to talk about. And yet it's simply another thing that I found. I've been doing lots of reading around, lots of things, because that's who I am, but I'm really particularly interested in the challenges that the medical profession have had around the female body, particularly with the vulva, the vagina, the clitoris, which only, officially made it into the medical documentation consistently from about the 90s. And I think, but I was at school in the 90s. How is that possible? There's so much out there that is designed to keep women small. And so we have to have people like you and us who are willing to stand up and share our story and share the things that have been going on, because what you talked about with the hurricane, with that need for everything to almost be burnt down, for everything to be like taken down, so there's an opportunity to rebuild. I think Rebecca Campbell's card in her pack, I can't remember which one it is, the crumbling. I think that came to mind as soon as you mentioned that. And that feels like almost where we are in the world at the moment. You look at all of the stuff that is going on, and it just feels like there is this crumbling of old systems, and there are people who are desperately trying to hold on to the past and the way it was done before, because they knew that. So that feels safer because they know the outcomes, whereas that's not going to be allowed to continue. So it's a really transformational time we're at the moment. And I just wondered if you had any thoughts on all of the stuff I've just said and what comes forward, because I know that you are so deeply connected. I'd love to hear what your take on the world, just on the world at the moment. Tiny question again. I'm going for the little ones today.
That's not a big question at all. Gosh, it's, it really is that same sort of cycle. We can get caught up in the destruction, in the chaos, in the just extremely grotesque stuff, quite frankly, that's going on in the world. It's really easy to get attached to the fear narrative, get attached to control narrative, whatever. I mean, there's so many different things that are in that space. And when we can come back to our own self, to our own bodies, to our own souls, and plug in to the earth and plug in to spirit, God, goddess, however you relate, there is something so pure that occurs in that moment that transcends and supersedes anything that's occurring in the world. And suddenly you know, wow, I really am meant to be here. I really am here for a reason at this time, because, we talked about spiritual awakening in the beginning, and I've listened to some of your other stuff. I know you guys have this conversation about the spiritual awakening. When you can see that there is this quote unquote awakening occurring, I do believe you can be in the both and. You can be in, oh shit, my house has water in it from the hurricane. I can no longer live there. I have to find a different place to live. And I can also be in, maybe there's something more beautiful on the other side of it for me. And I think there's just something potent about that. Again, it's about this death rebirth. It's about the yin and the yang. Both coexist at the same time. And if we can't see that both coexist at the same time, we're missing out on a lot of things in life. We're missing out on being able to bring forward balance. We're missing out on being able to see that there is choice. Even if we feel like our backs are against the wall, there's typically some other choice. There's some other option available. And maybe it's the right one, and maybe it's not the right one. I really try to release attachment to what's right or wrong and see things for what they are, right? You can go into a bird's eye perspective, and then you can come back to where you are right now in this moment. Right now in this moment, I'm here with the two of you. We're talking about something beautiful that is creating a ripple effect. How cool is that? My neighbors are probably like feeling more happy than they have, their whole week. It's like we have this ripple effect. And if we all can take our own space in this world and we can all take responsibility for who we can be and how we can operate, we have magic occurring in this world. If we can really, honor the process of these destructive cycles, knowing that there is space for the rebirth.
I want to ask a tangential question because it came up for me a couple of times. You talked a bit about the light and the dark, and where the polarizing sort of concept of the shadow and the light, and you have to allow both in as part of your spiritual journey. Like you can't have one without the other, right? But I think my question comes from my own experience, where I think I spent the majority of my lifetime in the dark, like in the shadowy spaces, and didn't really allow the light in until quite recently. There are people that are the opposite and spend their entire lifetime in the light and don't want to look at the shadows or acknowledge that they're there. And I guess my question for you is, in your experience of working with women, of your own journey, of, witnessing others, which one do you think is the more challenging to allow in, or to have lived in, and to then, does that question make sense? Like, I guess I just want to know, like, for me, allowing the light in was probably the most challenging thing I've ever done. I wonder if it's the same for people in the other direction, for want of a better way of describing it.
I love these questions. I always love when there's like something different that we can, dive into. Just tapping into like the collective energy and the collective response in the ether, and the way that I'm receiving it for myself, but also I'm just tuning into kind of this bigger answer to your question. I feel very emotional about it because it's a huge, courageous step to go through a spiritual awakening. It's a huge, courageous step to walk this path of a light worker, of a healer, of a, it doesn't have to be in that thing, right? A social worker, a teacher, someone who's running a nonprofit. It doesn't have to be, a hands-on healer, right? Whatever path you are walking to be of service in this world and go through this awakening. I think the answer really is dependent upon where you have lived most, because clearly you've lived most in one area And so the unbalanced space is the light or the dark dependent. But I think I want to just talk about both for a minute. So people who have been living more in the dark or come with, whatever, like just some serious traumas. And, I feel like unworthiness is the space that all women face a lot, whether living more in the light or the dark. I feel like the unworthiness conversation is there, but in that darkness, when we welcome the light, it's like, it's like when you're so cozy in the bed in the morning and it's light outside, but you're not ready to get up, and then your kid comes and like opens the blind and you're like, ah! And there's this crazy blinding feeling. It's sort of similar where you feel exposed. You feel exposed for whatever shame is present. You feel exposed for whatever decisions went awry. You feel exposed for any harm that someone did to you. You feel exposed when the light comes on. And it feels really scary to have that moment of vulnerability to say, okay, I'm willing to be seen a little bit. The light is so much truth. There's so much truth that resides there, that anything that we've been trying to hide from ourselves or put the blanket over or shove under the rug, it can no longer be hidden. And that's fucking terrifying. That is so terrifying. So the light can feel like so overpowering and so scary because it's so truthful. And if we haven't been wanting to know the truth or feel the truth, that's there. Now, if we look at the opposite, if you've been living in the light, there's also an element of, the truth, that there's miracles, that there's like these beautiful things that happen in life, but you're not willing to go to the places inside of yourself that feel sad, that feel angry, because you feel like there's not a place for it. And you feel like, well, what if I feel angry? Am I then less worthy? What if I feel the rage or feel the sadness? What does that mean? Will I ever see or feel that vibrancy again? And also, there's a space of vulnerability in going to the darkness because, I find a lot, I've been a people pleaser my whole life, a recovering people pleaser. I've shared, I like the rainbows and the butterflies. So I was definitely someone that going into, even though I've had a lot of pain and I've had a lot of things, I haven't necessarily wanted to share it with people or be vulnerable about the pains or the anger. I mean, hello, I know, Erin, you work a lot with ancestors and lineage and stuff. I got a crap load of anger in my mother's lineage and the women lineage. And so I am now learning to release the sacred rage where it's not destructive, that it can actually be used as a space of creation. But a lot of these ailments in my body, even the ectopic rupture, I believe, was a way for my body to release this ancestral rage.
Yeah,
and
it literally exploded.
People, it might sound crazy and convoluted, but again, I really tune in and it's crazy. So for me, going into the dark and going into the places where I can actually allow myself to feel the pain, feel the sadness, all the times that I people pleased and didn't say anything, all of that through my awakening has come forward. And how do I say it without word vomiting or without hurting someone else, and doing it in a safe place and looking at these shadows, looking at these places that feel so scary. So there is an element of kind of overwhelm on both ways, on both sides. And yet when we can sit there and look at the light or look at the dark in the mirror, see ourselves as both, we have to befriend the light and the dark. And that's where the alchemy comes in. And that's where the harmony comes in. And that's where we can actually like meet our nervous system in a place of stillness to make decisions, to receive the information that we're meant to receive for our next steps, to be present with a partner or a child or a client. It's not always fun, but when you can get there, it's amazing. Like that calm after the storm, it really exists. And it's a really beautiful sweet spot.
Yeah, it's definitely challenging, I think, for a lot of people to embrace the totality of being human, like all of that experience. But I hear a lot of people talking now about the dark night of the soul. Like if I had $1 for every time I'd heard someone reference that, I'd be very wealthy. And, you know, I think there's a lot of, for want of a better way of describing them, like mainstream spiritualists that talk about that being the awakening starting to occur, like when you go into that dark night of the soul. And I look at that and I'm like, dude, I was born into that shit. Like that was my life for 38 years. Right. So I don't necessarily subscribe to that particular thing being the catalyst, if you like. But I know that a lot of our listeners and a lot of the people that we work with describe something similar occurring. And it sounds very much like you've had aspects of that without perhaps having the whole thing. But I love how you reference the matrilineal rage within you, because as soon as you said that, I was like, yeah, it literally exploded inside of you. Like there's nothing more connected to your mother's line than your womb space and all of that, you know, reproductive stuff. So, yeah, I love the awareness that you have around that. And I would love to hear, possibly off screen, what you're sort of working with around that, because it feels like a really big shift forward, in terms of your own journey to be able to process that stuff. So yeah, well done for embracing it. Is all I have to say.
Thank you. I know it's a weird thing, you know. I'll go into breakdown. Even just this morning, my husband and he was like, I feel like let's go have some breakfast. Let's leave our phones in the car and let's just go talk. And I was like, oh, like he just created the space for me. And I was just like, let it all out. I was crying. I was releasing. And, you know, we just were having this conversation of, I was like, I'm sorry, I know I'm always the one in breakdown. He was like, no, but you're like so conscious of what your breakdowns are, and we're able to have this communication. And I know that's not always available with a partner. It's not always available, you know, to people. I think that's what's so beautiful about spaces like this, is that people can come to your podcast or my podcast or other spaces and places and communities where people are at least having the conversations. But knowing that your wholeness and your full ugly cry and your full giddy laughter are accepted. Mm-hmm. That's why I love holding space. We just finished, Gina and I just finished, you know, a 25 women event just a week ago, and it was so beautiful. And, you know, one of the main things is women were leaving is like, I just feel like I didn't have to prove myself. I could just show up and I could just be me. And I could just, like, whatever. And I was accepted. And I think, you know, Ellie, what you were saying, like, we've had all of these systems and these hoops and these boxes just shoved in our faces that we are now uncaging ourselves. And we're learning how to laugh and cry together and it all be okay. You know, I wish I knew what the guy's name was so I could, like, give him a shout out. It was Somebody's Real. And he was talking about just accepting people as they are, like the weather. He said, you know, if there's a fire, you're going to get your stuff and you're going to go. If there's a tornado, you're going to take cover. And you don't try to go out into the weather and change the weather. And so our relationships with ourselves, but also with others, is like, can we actually just be and witness? And in that being and in that witnessing, there's so much awareness and transformation that can take place, just even in that one single moment of simply being that vessel of love.
I mean, we could literally start on another tangent for another 45 minutes based just on that comment that you've just made there, because it's so true, because people struggle at the moment to just be. They can't, they've either got to convince somebody, like if they don't like what someone's saying or they don't like how someone's being, then there's this need to try and change them and to, you know, I'm right and you're wrong. Like if I'm right, that automatically makes the other person wrong. And we've got to break that down. And I think that kind of is a thread that I've seen through these whole conversations, is that if we can start to accept we are both the light and the dark, then we have to accept that other people are the same. And actually it's that wholeness that makes everybody unique and special and incredible. And if we can all be more witnessing of that in others and in ourselves, then that need to be right goes away, because actually we know that we're just perfect as we are. We don't need to be, you know, any more. Yeah, it's really interesting seeing how that has just come through everything, that we just need to be able to have both, to welcome everything, to welcome our whole parts, and know that, and the ugly cry, when you can find somebody who you can ugly cry with and they're totally okay with it and they still, you know, put their arms around you and support you. I had the same with my husband earlier in the week, like full on. And a friend of mine said, did you hold it together? I was like, no. Not in any way, shape or form. There was just a lot of tears everywhere, but he totally got it. And it was just, you know, finding those people. And if you don't have those people, there are people, like there are 3 incredible women just here who can actually hold that space. There is always somewhere for you to be able to share what's going on. And if that is something that you need, absolutely, you know, there are people, and we need to make it more okay for people to ugly cry in front of more people, because it is that opportunity to be vulnerable and show who you really are, because then that allows others to do it. Oh man, it's been so good hearing your voice and hearing your wisdom. It's just, I'm going to be processing for the rest of the day. Like
I'm going to be hearing about it for the rest of the day.
No, I think I'm going to be hearing a little bit like from Erin too, about just, yeah, I just love hearing how open you are about sharing your journey and all of the things that you've gone through and willing to support others. And I also love the fact that you have a business partner, because we find the work that we do together is just a whole nother level to what we can do on our own. When you find the opposite side of your coin, or, you know, the other person, it's incredible space to be in. So just thank you. Any last words or wisdom or thoughts? And Erin, I know you've got a couple of questions that you always like to ask at the end, so I just want to say my big thanks for being here, because it's been gorgeous to see you.
Thank you. I don't think I have any last words, but Erin, if you got some last questions, let's do it.
I do have some last questions. So we ask random questions at the end of every interview, and the first one is, what is the book that you wish you had written?
Oh, this is a good one. Wow. Oh gosh, you put me on the spot here. No, I really love Donna Eden's work and her work with energy medicine. And I think her book actually is called Energy Medicine. It's a brilliant book. So I would say energy medicine would be one of them.
We'll have to look that one up.
Yeah. This one is a well-used question, but if you could invite 3 people, living or dead, to dinner, who would you choose?
It's so funny. Okay. Honestly, probably strangers on the street. I've never really, people will ask me like, who's your role model, or who's your this or your that? And for me, I've never really lived my life having that, like being starstruck and or feeling like I needed to live my life like somebody else's. And so it's very odd. People look at me crazy when I say this, but I'm like, I don't really have that. So I think the most interesting thing would be meeting random strangers on the street and knowing that we would be from so many different kinds of backgrounds and different types of people and doing different things in the world and hearing each other's stories. I think it's really beautiful when we can find the common ground in that space.
What do you want your 90-year-old self to be able to say to you now?
Take the time off work and heal your body. It's been a journey this year, as you can imagine, after that experience. It's the little moments. Today, I pulled off the side of the street. I said, I'm just going to pull off. I'm going to go to the beach, and had an intuitive moment. Just more of those moments. Follow your intuition every step of the way. Do the things that sound crazy, and have a lot of fun doing it.
Awesome. And the last question is Ellie's favorite. What is your guilty pleasure?
Oh gosh, my guilty pleasure. My husband and I, we love watching Survivor, like the TV show Survivor. We love it. We can't get enough of it. We've now gone back to season 1 and 2 to start watching, Yeah, that's my most present guilty pleasure is Survivor on the couch at 11 o'clock at night.
Love that everybody has one. It just makes me so happy to know that we all have these and I just love that.
Yeah, I think that question is to help Ellie feel a bit more normal.
Totally.
It's a little bit of hotness express for everybody. It just depends on where and when and how.
Yeah, totally. Well, thank you so much for sharing your energy and your time and your wisdom and all the things with us. It's been a real pleasure to meet you and to hear you speak. And thanks for sharing your journey with us.
Thank you both so much. I appreciate it.
All right, and we'll be back next week with another fabulous woman.